HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Why Liberalism Works, How True Liberal Values Produce a Freer, More Equal, Prosperous World for All, by Deirdre Nansen McCloskey, read by Janet Metzger. Preface. By the time you finish this book, I hope I will have persuaded you of the case for a new and old liberalism. The L word is not taken to mean U.S. liberalism, the distressingly anti-liberal, lawyer-driven politics of increasing governmental planning and regulation and physical coercion. It is, instead, the rest of the world's liberalism, economist-driven, the liberal plan, as old Adam Smith wrote in 1776, of social equality, economic liberty, and legal justice, with a modest, restrained government giving real help to the poor. True modern liberalism. I am arguing for the continuing desirability of a liberalism conceived in the 18th century, so original and up-to-date am I, an idea slowly implemented after 1776 with many hesitations and false turns. I began to realize around 2005 or so that a liberal rhetoric explains many of the good features of the modern world compared with earlier and illiberal regimes, the economic success of the modern world, its splendid arts and sciences, its kindness, its toleration, its inclusiveness, its cosmopolitanism, and especially its massive liberation of more and more people from violent hierarchies, ancient and modern. Progressives and conservatives and populists retort that liberalism and its rhetoric also explain numerous alleged evils, such as the reduction of everything to money and markets, or the loss of community and God, or the calamity of immigration by non-whites and non-Christians. But they are mistaken. From the Philippines to the Russian Federation, from Hungary to the United States, liberalism has been assaulted recently by brutal, scaremongering populists, a worry. Yet for a century and a half, the relevance of liberalism to the good society has been denied in a longer, steadier challenge by gentle or not so gentle progressives and conservatives. Time to speak up. It is an optimistic book, piercing the sky-is-falling gloom which seems always to command a ready market. The pessimism is expressed innocently, even proudly, by good-hearted scholars and editorial writers. But then it is appropriated by bad-hearted tyrants in order to push people around. First, absolutely terrify the people. The terrorists are coming. Even my good friends, the good-hearted, the slow socialists and moderate conservatives, call up pessimisms about the economy or the environment or the greatness of the nation with similar consequences. Look at American politics after 9/11 or during Trump, or look as far back as British politics in the Gordon riots or in the age of the French Revolution. Terrorism works with more than guns and bombs and guillotines. The point here is to convert you to a humane, true liberalism, which you probably harbor anyway, modern liberalism. You don't really favor pushing people around with a prison industrial complex, or with regulations preventing people from braiding hair for a living, or with collateral damage from drone strikes, or with the separation of toddlers from their mothers at the southern U.S. border, do you? I'll bet not. As someone put it, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I try here to follow also another old rule for liberalism, an intellectual version of the Golden Rule articulated in 1983 by Amelie Oxenberg-Rorty, to listen, really listen to your questions and objections. The book includes, therefore, interviews by journalists and other earnest doubters who sometimes put forward well-intentioned but often illiberal objections to a free society. The origins of the essays in varied audiences leave a residue of repetition which I hope does not excessively grate. I've tried to keep forward motion despite the repetition, and some of the repetitions are healthy, things you really need to know. Chiefly that according to the scientific consensus in economic history, the much maligned capitalism has raised the real income per person of the poorest since 1800, not by 10% or 100%, but by over 3,000%. Cheap food, big apartments, literacy, antibiotics, airplanes, the pill, university education. The increase is a factor of 30. That is, 30 minus the original miserable base of 1.0. All divided by the base is 29 divided by 1, to be multiplied by 100 to express it per 100, or a 2,900% increase over the base. 3,000 near enough. I will keep saying it and keep dazzling you with my prowess in arithmetic until you feel it on your pulse. It is the greatest, yet regularly overlooked fact about the modern world. Most people, by actual questionnaire, think that since olden days the real capacity of poor people to buy goods and services has increased maybe 100%, at the outside 200%, a doubling or a tripling. They're quite wrong. The increase has been much greater. If we appreciate it, the appreciation will transform all our politics. For example, the fact of the great enrichment is a crucial element in showing that humane, true liberalism of the modern sort I advocate here is good and enriching in every sense. The great enrichment doesn't mean, of course, that there's nothing more to do in helping the poor, especially by ending the numerous, monstrous, and yet politically popular policies that in fact damage them worldwide. But it does mean that it is mischievous to attack, as many political theories do, a capitalism that has done more than anything else to help the poor. The great enrichment doesn't mean that little bits of other systems, a soupçon of socialism for worthy public projects, a cup of Christian charity for the poor, a tablespoon of encouragement to worker-owned cooperatives such as law and accounting firms are to be scorned. But it does mean that replacing the system as a whole would be disastrous for the poor, as it has been shown to be in the USSR after 1917, in Venezuela after 1999, and over again in between. The book was not through-written, unlike my economic historical trilogy, backing up many of the factual claims made here. To make this go more smoothly, I've arranged the whole into a moderately coherent argument, the skeleton. You should notice that Part 3 is a detailed inquiry into the leading illiberal worry nowadays, the alleged rise of inequality, just to show that detailed inquiries are possible and yield liberalism-favoring results. Part 4 deals in less detail with various other illiberal worries. Part of the thrilling drama of the present book is watching the rather obvious liberal ideas retailed here, peddled by me in essays from a miscellany of newspapers and magazines over the past few decades, seep into my slow-thinking economist's mind. The seeping took place during my mad, programless life from my early 50s on, changing gender, becoming a progressive Christian, embarking on explaining the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, seeing the 18th-century light. Except for the long introductory part, which has circulated a bit in a shorter version as Manifesto for a New American Liberalism, Most of the essays are occasional, that is, occasioned by this or that invitation to sound off. The variety of audiences I was asked to address makes the prose not uniform in tone, though I've edited it here and there to approach uniformity. I have included a couple of my more open-handed academic pieces defending the foundations of a free society from The Bourgeois Virtues, Ethics for an Age of Commerce, the first volume of the bourgeois-era trilogy on history, economics, and literature. I've written a good deal for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Financial Times, but most of the journalistic pieces here are from Reason magazine, because Reason is the leading voice of true liberalism in the United States. You need to know it and to subscribe. Get woke and reasonable. In other words, each chapter has its own little arc of argument and often its own style about political philosophy, or gay rights, or economic history, or economic policy, or Thomas Piketty. The beginning of each provides a sentence or two of context. When an assertion is made in the text without a reference, you can usually assume either that it is referenced elsewhere in the book, or that I am taking the assertion to be obvious on its face, or obvious in light of current economic and historical knowledge. The book is not an academic tome, but it tries earnestly to sustain a serious standard of truth-telling based on actual facts and coherent ideas. Well, you judge. I urge you to reconsider your politics as I did by listening, really listening, to new facts and ideas, or reconsidering the old ones. Staying open-minded is usually a good plan. The economist and true liberal Brian Kaplan asks, "Whoever made an enemy by contradicting someone's belief about what is wrong with his car?" Yet enemy-making is commonplace in our debates about politics, such as about abortion or the minimum wage or trade protectionism. Kaplan continues, "For practical questions, such as auto repair, standard procedure is to acquire evidence before you form a strong opinion. Match your confidence to the quality and quantity of your evidence, and remain open to criticism. For political questions, such as whether we should be left or right or liberal, we routinely override these procedural safeguards. I want you to become less self-satisfied in your progressivism or your conservatism or even your relaxed middle-of-the-roadism. A political identity, whatever it may be, acquired at age 20 or so and never seriously questioned thereafter. I want you to realize that the conventional opinions all depend on turning the government's monopoly of coercion on your good neighbors, and then on yourself. Often enough, to revive a useful word, a favorite of the 18th-century essayist and conversationalist Samuel Johnson, the conventional opinions are mere cant, which is to say, routinely repeated yet unexamined ethical claims, often wrong or bad. Johnson would say, "My dear friend, clear your mind of cant." Good advice. I want you to espouse modern liberal rhetoric, sweet talk, peaceful exchange, toleration of the other, and to see their good consequences. I want you to become much less certain that the problem is capitalism, or the Enlightenment, or that liberty can be taken too far, or that hating other people is jolly good fun, or that governmental programs of war, socialism, expropriation, protection, subsidy, regulation, nudging, and prohibition are usually innocent exercises by our wise mothers and fathers in government to better the lives of us all. With an open mind and a generous heart, dear friends, I believe you will tilt toward a humane, true liberalism. Welcome, then, to a society held together by sweet talk among free adults, rather than by coercion applied to slaves and children. Part 1. You should become a humane true liberal. 1. Modern liberals recommend both golden rules, that is, Adam Smith's equality of opportunity. I make here the case for a modern and humane version of what is often called libertarianism. It is not right-wing, reactionary, or some scary creature out of dark money. It stands in the middle of the road, recently a dangerous place to stand, being tolerant and optimistic and respectful. It's true liberal, that is, anti-statist, opposing the impulse of people to push other people around. It's not, "I've got mine," or "let's be cruel." Nor is it, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you by force of arms if necessary." It's, "I respect your dignity and am willing to listen, really listen, helping you when you wish, on your own terms." When people grasp it, most like it. Give it a try. It depends on and nourishes ethics. Ethics has 3 levels: the good for self, the good for others, and the good for the transcendent purpose of a life. The good for self is the prudence by which you self-cultivate, learning to play the cello, say, or practicing centering prayer. Self-denial is not automatically virtuous. How many self-denying mothers does it take to change a light bulb? None. I'll just sit here in the dark. The good for a transcendent purpose is the faith, hope, and love to pursue an answer to the question, so what? The family, science, art, the football club, God gives the answers that humans seek. The middle level is attention to the good for others. The late 1st century BCE Jewish sage Hillel of Babylon put it negatively yet reflexively. Do not do unto others what you would not want done unto yourself. It's masculine, a guy liberalism, a gospel of justice, roughly the so-called non-aggression axiom as articulated by libertarians since the word libertarian was redirected in the 1950s to a then right-wing liberalism. Matt Kibbe puts it well in the title of his 2014 bestseller, Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff, a Libertarian Manifesto. On the other hand, the early 1st century CE Jewish sage Jesus of Nazareth put it positively. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's gal liberalism, a gospel of love, placing upon us an ethical responsibility to do more than pass by on the other side. Be a good Samaritan. Be nice. In treating others, a humane libertarianism attends to both golden rules. The one corrects a busybody and coercive pushing around. The other corrects an inhumane and soul-destroying selfishness. Together, they are the other ethics of modern liberalism. What we do not need is the reactionary version, the old spoof of the golden rule, namely, those who have the gold rule. Nor do we need to follow the Florida football player on the eve of the Florida State game. I follow the good book, do unto others before they do it unto you. Neither is non-aggressive or nice. The golden rule in either formulation, note, is radically egalitarian. In the Abrahamic religions, you are to treat every human soul the way you would wish to be treated. You are to honor your one God and keep His day holy. But the rest of the 10 Commandments are about treating other humans as you would wish to be treated in manners such as truth-telling or adultery. By contrast, in the theism of the Hindus or in the civic religion of the Confucians, you are to treat the Brahmin or the emperor as superior souls. An untouchable or a peasant or a woman or a younger son is not to expect equal reciprocal treatment. Of course, it was not until the bourgeois societies of the late 18th-century Europe that anyone but an early Christian radical or a late Muslim saint thought to carry out in any large society the sweetly other-regarding theory of Abrahamic egalitarianism. Until Tom Paine or Adam Smith, a duchess was still a duchess, a sultan still a sultan, King Herod still great. In most of the world, the word libertarianism is still plain liberalism, as in the usage of the middle-of-the-road, deregulating, anti-illiberal democracy president of France elected in 2017, Emmanuel Macron, with no neo about it. That's the L word I'll use here. But either libertarianism or liberal will do if understood to follow in modern fashion the real golden rules. The sainted Tom Palmer of the liberal Atlas Network has it right. Chances are almost 100% that you act like a libertarian. You don't hit other people when their behavior displeases you. You don't take their stuff. You don't lie to them to trick them into letting you take their stuff, or knowingly give them directions that cause them to drive off of a bridge. You're a civilized person. Congratulations. You've internalized the basic principles of libertarianism and of true liberalism. The American economist Daniel Klein calls the 300-year-old tradition that he and I praise Liberalism 1.0, being Hillel of Babylon's negative version of the Golden Rule, Kibbe's and Palmer's Don't Hit People. Channeling the C.S. Lewis book on the minimum commitments of faith, Mere Christianity, Dan also calls it mere liberalism. I push it along a little here, more in line with Jesus of Nazareth's version to liberalism 2.0, maybe 1.5. Eamon Butler of the Adam Smith Institute in London has written 2 splendid short books, Classical Liberalism, a Primer, and An Introduction to Capitalism. I wish Eamon had left off the classical and had abandoned the misleading word capitalism. David Bowes of the Liberal Cato Institute in Washington wrote a lucid guide, Libertarianism, a Primer, reshaped in 2015 as The Libertarian Mind. I wish David had called it The Modern Liberal Mind. In Britain they call it Orange Book Liberalism. In a desperate summary for Americans, Humane Liberalism 2.0 is pre-Trump grown-up in trade policy and in civil discourse, post-Obama tolerant in social policy, post-Clinton responsible in federal deficits, post-LBJ democratic in civil rights, pre-McKinley non-interventionist in foreign policy, and pre-Lincoln or even pre-Jackson hands-off in economic policy. The complications are necessary. The economist Arnold Kling notes that identity politics on the left and Trumpism on the right means that it is no longer enough to say of true liberals in the United States that they are traditionally democratic on social rights and traditionally Republican on economic rights. The blessed Adam Smith recommended in 1776 the liberal plan of equality, liberty, and justice. The first in Smith's triad is a hoped-for equality in social standing, which he favored. Contrary to the attitude of the Country Club, and contrary to the pride of some of the men wearing Adam Smith ties, and contrary to a leftist's assumptions about Smith when she has not actually read a whole page of him with attention, Smith was an egalitarian. A man's a man for all that. The second item that Smith hoped for in his liberal plan, equal liberty, is the economic right he wanted you to have, equal to anyone else's, to open a grocery store or enter an occupation, especially occupations. Smith was outraged by the licensing and passports and other restrictions on the ability of a working man to use his powers harmlessly or indeed helpfully. He would have been appalled, for example, by the fine enforced rule in Oregon nowadays that you cannot publish remarks about engineering matters, such as the timing of traffic lights, without being a duly government-licensed engineer, even if you are in fact fully trained as an engineer. The third hoped-for item, justice, is seen by Smith the liberal as another equality, your standing equal to any other person before the powers of the government and before the courts of the government if used by other people against you. Smith was concerned with what philosophers call commutative justice, the justice in the procedures for getting stuff and then protecting it and one's person. The contrast is with distributive justice, namely, how the stuff and personhood, after it is gotten, will be distributed, as it were. The very word distributed is an illiberal metaphor, because the distribution is imagined as being achieved by coercion, not by commutative, voluntary agreement. It's not a deal, but a draft. Smith's commutative justice is summarized in the modern idiom by Klein and Bowes and other liberals as the just procedure of not messing, without consent, a right to say no, with other people's stuff or persons. We should all be so constrained in justice equally. The theme in liberalism, you see, is equality. Derived, it may be, from the equal natural rights of each, or from the somewhat self-contradictory ruminations of utilitarians, or from the analogy with exchange among equals embodied in contractarianism, or from the implied equality under a community of Catholic conservatives or leftish communitarians, or from the consequences of equality for the survival of societies, or, as seems best to me, from the modest, analytical egalitarianism so characteristic of 18th-century social thought in Scotland. Analytical egalitarianism was labeled and explored in 2008 by the economists and intellectual historians Sandra Peart and David Levy, with numerous examples. A fault in Friedrich Hayek's famous liberal book, The Constitution of Liberty, of 1960, is that he depends on consequential reasons for liberty, such as economic productivity or community survival. Likewise, the economist Jeffrey Myron of Harvard and of the liberal Cato Institute in Washington articulates most ably a consequentialist libertarianism, by which he means that one can often show that liberty achieves higher utility in terms of output than slavery. The war on drugs, for example, had bad effects on U.S. income, not to speak of Colombia's or Mexico's. The trouble is that such utilitarian reasoning can also justify the worst tyrannies, as the tyrants regularly claim. It seems better to justify free human life through the natural and equal and analytically modest dignity we should all learn in our adulthood to have and to grant to others, regardless of payoff. Such equality is what Huck Finn gradually discovered on the raft about Jim, for whom he was willing then to suffer hell's fire. So I am taking back the word liberal, used strangely in the United States and nowhere else to mean leftish statist. In Latin America, it has been the conservatives and their cousins, not the socialists and their cousins, who have stolen the word liberal to mean rightish statist. Recently, the U.S. liberals have become frightened by the L word and now call themselves progressives. Let them have the word progressive, supposing they don't mind being associated with the excesses of U.S. progressivism, such as compulsory sterilizations. Then we real and modern liberals get to keep the good old L word. 2. Liberalism had a hard coming. In the 18th century, the liberal idea aborning was that every person, regardless of age or gender or ethnicity.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?